Hello, and welcome back to Front Porch Radio. My name is Julie Wilder, and every Monday from 4 to 5 p.m., we host Conversations for the Common Good, live here on WPRK 91.5 FM out of Rollins College. And today, I've got an old friend wandering back to the front porch steps, landscape architect David Schroeder. He's lived in more places than most of us have postcards for, like Colorado, California, Pennsylvania, Michigan, I think Georgia twice, Texas, one of my favorite places, North Carolina, Nevada, and thank goodness for all of us, he landed here in Florida back, I think, in 2005. He studied landscape architecture at the University of Georgia and NC State, where he wrote a master's thesis titled Death Matters on nature-preserved cemetery design, which, if you ask me, sounds like the most peaceful place you could ever take a nap for eternity. His first job was with a firm that worked on Burning Man headquarters, which is such a unique project to be involved with. But after that, he arrived here, of course, in 2005 when he couldn't find a firm doing the kind of work he believed in, which I can relate to. And he did what all good, stubborn visionaries do. He made it his own. That's how his boutique firm, Evolving Landscapes, was born. And today, David's work is all about transforming contemporary lawns, tearing out the sod and replacing it with native plants, edibles, Florida-friendly landscapes, and outdoor living spaces that actually nourish the land. He's helped shift our local understanding of what beauty looks like in a yard, more alive, more ecological, more connected. David, welcome back to Front Porch Radio.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mean, it's been like, what, a decade since you've been here? At least. But truly, I am going to start this conversation in a little bit of an odd place, not for you. But usually we don't start conversations off with burials. But that conversation, it really did sparks something in me. And I decided, like, right then and there, I was like, I want to be buried in an eco preserve or whatever. And of course, there weren't any at that time. But I've like been so interested in it. I actually kept tab. I think there's one that started in Gainesville, maybe.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah.
Forgetting the name, Prairie's in there, Payne's Prairie, something maybe. It'll come to me. But yeah, there's one in Gainesville. My first project after grad school was designing one in the Panhandle of Florida, which at the time was the second in the country, but remains tiny because it's literally in a town of 40 people next to a town of like 1,500 people. So not a lot of activity there, but nonetheless, got to.
Well, can you describe for people what it is? Because a lot of people, let's face it, most of us aren't thinking about, they're like, okay, I want to get cremated, or I guess I get embalmed, and like those are the options. But most people aren't really thinking, especially like in their mid-age or younger, like where, here we are at a college station, right?
We always want to suppress these thoughts of death, and our inevitable demise. It's quite natural. So generally speaking, there's kind of two broad categories of nature preserve cemeteries. One would be where there's some sort of land that you're looking to preserve, and then you work with a burial process to preserve as much land as possible. There's also the restoration process or way of doing things where maybe you don't have a pristine ecosystem that you're working with, but the land that you have access to maybe has been a farm for 100 years. And then you're looking at more of a restorative process. But generally, the basic idea is taking the billions of dollars that our death industry uses in order to...
It is one of the most consistent industries.
It is, yes. I mean, food and death, and you try to divert as much of that money into saving and preserving land or restoring land as possible, and then doing the least impactful burials as possible. So what that could mean in some cases would be, for instance, the very first one in the country was started by Dr. Billy Campbell and his wife Kimberly in the Panhandle, or in the Blue Ridge Mountains, the little slice of South Carolina that gets the Blue Ridge Mountains. And he inherited, he's like, I forgot, I'm going to say fourth or fifth generation, kind of mountain men. But he went on to Emory University, got a degree in internal medicine and is the town doctor. So there's always jokes that he's got a conflict of interest because he's going to bury you if you die, and he's going to get paid if he fixes you.
Either way.
Either way.
Either
Yeah,
way.
either way. But he inherited this land that had, maybe at one point it was farmed, but it had grown back into old growth forest. And he had developed this idea, had already kind of taken hold in Europe, but nothing had happened in the United States yet. So what he did is, because you just can't like buy a bunch of land and bury people on it. There still has to be some infrastructure.
I don't know why. I don't know why that wouldn't be allowed, but go ahead.
So, and I forgot the exact acreage, but let's just, for maybe mathematical reasons, let's just say it's 50 acres that he preserved. It may be 60 or something. A small portion of that has, a gravel road coming in off the main road. There was I think it was a 150-year-old tiny little church that was falling apart. They bought, or maybe even got it for free, moved it to their property, restored it, and they call that the All Faiths Chapel. Mm-hmm. That's where, the bodies are displayed before they go to the, they would hold the wake there and stuff, mm-hmm. if they choose to have one. And then there's trails that go through the preserve. And then bodies are only buried in two places. Either some people like to be near a faith place. So the All Faith Chapel, they have more of like a graveyard where there's high density burials. Mm-hmm. If you want to be buried near more like a churchyard. But then the rest of the 50 acres, there's trails that can only be accessed by they in this case, not all cases, but this case they have a horse and a buggy that they carry the casket on, and then people walk behind it, so you don't have to have like a road with asphalt that can handle tractors and all that. Then the grave sites are scattered along those trails, tucked in between the trees, and then you just dig a hole.
Old fashioned. Just shovel. Right.
Yeah. You still got to go deep because that's all about keeping animals out of your grave.
Right.
The tradition, so what we're used to seeing when we see a cemetery is, flat mowed areas with headstones of Italian marble. What you don't see is you saw it before, the burial is the casket that's probably made out of like imported hardwoods, all this. And then the way that they keep these cemeteries flat and mowable, because as you can imagine, so what happens to keep it all flat, you pay thousands of dollars for a concrete vault that goes over your casket. That keeps the land from subsiding. When you and your casket decompose, the land would subside,
sink. Okay.
And sink, and then your lawnmower.
Regular people might say sink. Yes.
So, you put concrete down, and then you add a foot or two of topsoil.
Right.
And then, what happens at a nature preserve cemetery is you dig a hole, put the casket and the body back, and in the nature preserve cemetery may not even be a casket. No hardwoods for sure. No non-biodegradable products. So you could have a burial shroud. You could have a cardboard box, mm-hmm. Pine box, stuff mm-hmm. like that.
Stuff that breaks down really easy.
Stuff that breaks down. Mm-hmm. So then what happens at a nature preserve cemetery is, they also, when they're digging the hole, they take care to keep the topsoil separate from below so that they can put that all back. But then you end up with the burial mound because you've fluffed the soil, you've aerated it, so now it's not compacted as much. And then you added the volume of the casket. So when you put all that back, it's going to be mounded up. And what Billy Campbell pointed out is that in the temperate forest and forests throughout the world, there's something called pit mound ecology, where when a tree falls, you have a pit and a mound. So you have the pit where the roots used to be, and then you have a mound where the things are decomposing. These burial practices add the mound part back, so that can be like a drier little microclimate than the surrounding areas or something like that. Um, and then to deal with the headstone situation, because people, they're going to want to know where grandpa was buried, right?
Yeah, of course.
Minimal legal minimum is that you have to be able to find a body for legal reasons if they need to exhume for some reason. So at least there has to be a GPS tracker. There's nothing that says you have to have a headstone or
Hmm.
something. Just the police need to be able to find the body if they need to. But what they've done down in Florida, we need to find some creative solutions. But what they've done
Are you talking about the
for,
water table?
well, no,
That's where I went.
oh yeah, well that's part of the problem. But for the headstones specifically at Memorial Ecosystems, they are digging up rocks because they're in the Blue Ridge Mountains. So they set aside rocks from the site that are nice, flatter ones, and then there's a guy in town that has an engraving thing, and you can pick your stone. Like we found these 40 stones on site that make good headstones. Take your pick, and you can have them engraved, with whatever you wish. And then those go back. Um, and then with the restoration side of things, which would be what I worked on in the Panhandle of Florida after grad school. This guy inherited 200 acres of turkey feed from his father when his father died, and he still needs to make money. So he's continuing with the turkey feed, but he doesn't need 200 acres of that. So the Glendale Memorial Nature Preserve, he got in touch with Billy Campbell, and Billy Campbell, sent me as a guy right out of grad school who could work in this little tiny,
He's like, I got a guy for you.
yeah, yeah. I mean, this guy,
He's got enthusiasm.
turkey feed maybe doesn't, line your pockets with a lot of money to hire, the big firms to come out. So,
Right.
This kid just graduated from grad school,
Well, I mean, there wasn't
and there
wasn't
weren't many
anyone
people
doing
doing
it.
it. Sure.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
wrote the master's thesis. I think you got the cred.
Right. In fact, my graduate not my graduate advisor, he was very supportive. The head of the department told me that it wasn't quite a thesis worthy topic, and I said I think it is, so I'm
Yeah.
going to do it.
Yeah.
Unless you force me not to, I'm going to do it.
Right.
And then I had the satisfaction of before I actually left campus that because the editor of Landscape Architecture magazine wrote an article and heavily featured Billy and Kimberly Campbell.
Mm-hmm.
And so he, slipped him my thesis, and that, it didn't get quoted, but it got cited. So
Right.
I got to show, my department chair, like you said, it wasn't worthy, but the editor of landscape, the fellow, he's
Right.
a fellow of the American Society of Landscape Architects, felt it.
Well,
It was.
I think he thinks back to that often as, I mean, it's become something that's a real thing that's taking root around the country, really. I mean, now they have people that are doing composting, human composting.
Yeah, there's all these sort of adjacent things that kind of sprung out about the same time.
Mm-hmm.
There's the mushroom composting thing, and that could work in one of these nature preserve cemeteries. Kind of the main emphasis. I mean, there's sort of it's a more ecological way for your body to decompose, and you're not using embalming fluids and all this
That
stuff.
always creeped me out. I was like, why? What do you know? First of all, I try to eat organic and live, naturally as much as possible. And then what are you going to do? Put chemicals in me at the very end? That's just creepy, man.
Yeah, the stats aren't at the top of my head like
Right.
they used to be, but I want to say the U.S. There's a great book called The American Way of Death by Jessica Mitford, and I want to say her statistics, and this was probably 30 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
was either 1 or 4. I want to say 4 Olympic-sized swimming pools worth of embalming fluid every year
Mm-hmm.
that is leaking into our our water sources.
Yeah, not good. Yeah, gross. Yeah.
So I forgot where.
Well, yeah. So I mean, one of the things I just remember years later, a friend of mine, her grandfather passed away, really. And he owned some land up in St. Augustine, and they had gone through whatever red tape that they had to go through with the county or city or whatever to make sure that they could use part of their family land for a burial plot. And I just remember at that time, thinking about, I mean, for her, it was a process where the family could be in, I mean, like, they all just got out their shovels, all the kids, and, you know, buried their dad. They washed his body, covered him in a shroud, and carried him down there, dug a hole and, put the dirt on top of him. And she said it was such an incredible way to just find closure, to be a part of that process. Um, and so it's just, and like, these are the kinds of things that are like, it always used to be this way that you would bury someone just in the ground. And then, modern whatever takes over, and then it becomes a different kind of industry where now you're going to pay to embalm and you're going to pay for coffins, and it's, an industry is going to try to make money.
And reminds me that a lot of people, when they're like, yeah, I understand, like before I don't even broach the topic of nature preserve cemeteries, there's a growing number of people choosing cremation because they recognize that it's, the grandkids don't go to see grandpa's grave, really,
Yeah.
And you really have like 3 generations for people who even care about you. You may go to your grandparents' grave, but you're probably not going to your great grandparents' grave unless
Right.
you're doing like ancestry research, and then it's more academic, probably, anyways. So a lot of people have chose cremation because they view it as more ecological. There's still, they still got, it takes a lot of BTUs to break down a body, and there's other things related to that. It's not natural, to really,
Yeah.
Now the Tibetans have this, thing where they do like sky burials and stuff like that. And there's other ways to, kind of get rid of a body, but there's, or not get rid of it.
Well, you know what I'm saying, but I think we get you.
Yes.
It's kind of a hard topic to talk about without sounding like you're a sociopath.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So with cremation, you are surely not wasting land.
Right.
Like I would view most cemeteries being a waste of land. But with nature preserve cemeteries, it's not like the land, ideally at least, this is land that would have been up for development, and now you're preserving it because and they can afford to preserve it because you are paying, the fees and everything, which I should note are much cheaper than what you're going to find when you go try to plan, a burial at another,
like a traditional funeral home.
Yeah, exactly. I forget. Yeah, again, the stats aren't the top, but it's about half the price because you're not paying for embalming, you're not paying for the concrete vault. There's still, and which is what surprises me about your acquaintance getting to bury dad on the land, is that there are a lot of legal restrictions on cemeteries.
Oh yeah, they had to jump through hoops. I know that much. Yeah, and it was like they had a lot of land. It wasn't like they weren't in the suburbs.
Yeah, that is essential.
Yeah.
And then there's also like they probably, I assume, and maybe each state maybe has slightly different things, but you have to have one of those, forgetting the name, but one of those accounts that has enough money in it to where you can maintain the cemetery.
Oh, for a while. Okay, that makes sense.
So that, because this needs to last a long time, which is another great thing about these nature preserve cemeteries, is that once you start burying your relatives and your community on these nature preserve cemeteries, it's almost virtually impossible to
grab it back
and to make it a parking lot for a grocery store there.
Yeah.
Kind of locks it in for a long time. Now they recommend, most cemeteries are trying to maximize plots per acre.
Right.
They're trying to be efficient and all that. These nature preserve cemeteries, their density is based on land value. So, cheaper land, you can do really, really low impact burials. More expensive land, you're gonna, you basically are balancing disturbance with economy, where
Hmm.
because you gotta maintain the taxes and
Yeah.
whatever else is on this land.
But I think to your point, it's a, for especially landowners, it's another way of looking at things to make sure it actually gets preserved. Because as we see, like, in politics, they're trying to grab the state parks,
Yeah, right.
like
Yeah,
it's,
and I would love to see
it's just,
this in the future, as they're, if they're still doing those, big gated communities, or they don't have to be gated, but if they're
right.
doing those big planned communities, and there's often now, through pressure from us, there, most of those neighborhoods now have to preserve a certain amount of land.
Right.
um I would love to see, if you're developing 1,000 acres for this huge neighborhood, and you got to preserve some land, why not that be a nature preserve cemetery as part of that?
Yeah, I mean that's actually, and they are starting to design, like dark sky communities and communities
Anchored
that,
communities
yeah,
and
that
stuff.
take into ecological and yeah, planning for end of life is it's a part of the cycle.
Right. And what I would really like to see is take this to the next step, where it's not only a place for end of life, but it's the whole life cycle. So there could be natural birthing centers there. Even before death, there could be, sort of like a hospice that, does things
Yeah.
gentler, or whatever, maybe. And then, uh, even in my proposal for my conceptual design, for the Glendale Nature Preserve, we included, they had this nice little island on on a little beaver pond, and proposed a nice little bridge where, like, the bride and groom getting married could go, across this bridge, and
How romantic, David.
and then and then back on the other side would be the friends and family gathering.
It'd be a special couple.
Right. But then you could, it kind of takes you through
I'm
it.
laughing, but I actually think that's beautiful.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then perhaps even, something that, like, doesn't really tug at me much, but, um, a lot of people like ritual, and I feel like, Americans could use sort of a coming of age ritual, kind of to mark
Yeah,
adulthood or
so like
something.
a rites of passage.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm my whole
Or maybe
books my
graduation.
bookstore has a whole thing on rites of passage. So yeah, like being able to, those are the things that we don't really that do in our society much anymore. And people who've listened to my show for a while, I did a whole series on home birthing and natural birthing, and getting more involved in births, because everything's like outsourced. Death is outsourced and birth is outsourced, and you go into this like box, and then you have a baby cut out of you, and like, and then you go into, and then you go burn in a fire or get into another box and go back in the ground. I mean, it's just kind of a weird thing, and the families aren't involved anymore. And so I think I don't know, for me philosophically, I think it just kind of perpetuates people's fear of death, and not just the acceptance of it's like a natural part of life. But
That's right.
we could talk for hours about philosophical things like that. But I also want to know, because that was like because some of your foundational work in college was studying that and writing the master's thesis. But of course, you also studied architecture, landscape. That was, of course, more traditional. But you do landscape architecture in a slightly different way than maybe your average landscape architect. I'd love for you to tell people, like, what is it, and how is what you do a little bit different than what you might find somewhere else?
Sure. Well, one is not as different as it used to be, which is great.
Yeah.
But 20 years ago, when I started evolving landscapes, I was really first intending just to work for somebody else. I only had 2 years under my belt in Reno, Nevada, and moved to a new state, and felt probably I should work for somebody else. Put together a beautiful resume, that never got sent to anybody, because I just came up, I wasn't going to work on resorts, and I wasn't going to work on, giving people lush tropical paradises, and, with exotic plants, which is what most of South Florida was wanting, where I was when I first moved, to Florida. And then, found Central Florida a little more to my liking, and so with evolving landscapes, we try to predominantly remove as much St. Augustine as possible. That's kind of like, if I just had to break it down, that's kind of what we do, is just tear out lawns and then put back some variety of native plants, edible plants, or in some cases just Florida-friendly gardens, ones that plants that are maybe not native but provide some sort of wildlife benefit, or at least aren't invasive and do well with low amounts of resources, low water, low fertilizer needs and stuff like that. It's kind of like bare minimum needs. We do I have my preferences of stuff, but I also realize that there's a lot of purists out there that only will do natives, and I applaud them. But I find that it's hard to find clients that are really interested in that, or they may be philosophically, and then when you give it to them, they're like,
yeah, I want my roses.
Yes, exactly.
I'm one of those people.
So we have a 50% native minimum, and then need to increase it, because we've been working somewhat not closely, but we've been affiliated more and more with a group called the Outside Collaborative, and they, their minimums are more like 80% native, which I think is great, and often our projects are probably in the 60 to 70% range. And if it's edible and you're going to eat it, then I don't really care if it's native or not, as long as it's not invasive. So like, if somebody wanted a permaculture garden, focused on natives, then I'm not going to be counting focused on edibles, I'm not going to be counting up the native percentage. And then but we're also not only plant-based. I want to get people outside, either with outdoor living spaces, outdoor living rooms, fire pits, stuff like that. I've had less luck in my career so far getting recreation into people's yards. I've proposed probably a dozen bocce courts, and
aren't you working on a property with a treehouse though? Like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and that one fell through. All these,
I remember we talked about that.
Yeah, we did.
I was like, oh man, nobody wants to do the fun stuff.
Yeah. I have a whole portfolio full of my favorite unbuilt projects, and
Yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the things that has always, been what I've admired about your work through the years, is that it really is, you're creating I'm very philosophical about porches, being a front porch radio lady. And front porches are like the in between the interior home and the community, and that's where things happen. But a lot of people, they don't spend a lot of time in their yards. But that's because there's nothing exciting going on there. And so you really actually, like, I've seen a bunch of the herb spirals that you've done and some of the riverbeds that you've done for the properties that you've worked on, and it reminds me of like Andy Goldsworthy, if anybody knows who that is. Very obscure reference for probably a lot of people, but it's just it's a beautiful, harmonious, like, space making where people don't feel like nature is out there, but they feel part of nature, and they just feel, I don't know, it's like creating a third space or more room in your house, because your house now has not lawns, but little nature preserve of your own, almost.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we do. It's kind of interesting when we get new clients of whether or not they want us to focus on their front yard or backyard. And we usually end up with a lot of backyards, which is fun because it's where people tend to want to live, unlike your front porch.
Right.
But, people really like their backyards.
It's great for entertaining.
It is.
Having barbecues,
right.
Inviting people over.
Yeah. But then so many of our, suburban homes come with just, foundation plantings, the minimal amount of trees, and then acres of grass. And it's hard for a lot of people to, like, break out of that. In my,
Yeah.
parents being a great example of that. They love their suburban neighborhoods and everybody with their
HOA. Are you
HOA.
good? Are you like, are you a good candidate for an HOA type house, or are there too many rules there, or like how does it like?
Well, we've run into a little bit of resistance, but not much.
Mhm.
There are some restrictions on what HOAs can actually impose on you.
Oh,
They can kind of define certain things, and as long as it falls under Florida friendly, then. But like I don't think it's legal now to insist on St. Augustine, but HOA could still probably insist on some amount of percentage of your yard to remain lawn. But
mhm.
then you could do it in a more eco-friendly way or something.
Okay. So I wish that we could give everyone visuals. And what's the website or like Facebook, Instagram? Where can people find you? Maybe there's some people at their computer that might want some
Yeah,
visuals.
we have hundreds of photos on our Facebook and Instagram. Just look for Evolving Landscapes. At least 10 years ago, there used to be a company in Kansas that had the same name. I think it'll be very obvious by looking at a photo or two whether or not it's our
It's
work or not.
okay. Yeah, and so like, if it's not a lawn, then what is it? Like what are you doing that's different, and why is that better for the homeowner and the environment?
Sure. Well, we often start with circulation. I mean, that's not always. It kind of depends on the program given by the client. But we kind of look first to elements and how to transition between those, and then I just start filling the spaces with groups of trees and plantings and stuff that would be appropriate. And then we usually go through a whole design conceptual process where we look at different alternatives to the same sort of design restrictions that they give me. And if the clients, some clients are very clear about what they want and some aren't. So if they're clear about what they want, then I try to give them what they want in slightly different forms. If they're not sure, then often I try to give them sort of a like, you know, a safer option and then more of an out of the box option, and then see which of those out of the box options that they like and try to, maybe incorporate that in some sort of compromise design. But we're taking up a lot, and we don't always end up removing 100% of someone's lawn.
Right.
One, it's expensive.
Right.
If you got a quarter acre of St. Augustine that went in for like $1.50 a square foot, but now you got to pay to take it out. Now you got to redo the irrigation. Now you need to add some compost. Now you need to add plants. Now you need to add mulch. Maybe there's a paver pathway that's going in at some
So you do
double
things
figures
maybe
per
in
square.
phases.
Yeah, we do. I
Yeah.
mean, that was one of the impetus for the name Evolving Landscapes. Would be I knew that transforming people's yards, some people would have the budget to do it in one swoop.
Right.
Most won't, and that's been the case. Often we'll end up doing like maybe a backyard one year and a front yard the other year. Other times we have clients who hire our gardening staff and that go out on a regular basis. And then if they have, like, one client had an extra like $750 a year above and beyond her maintenance budget. So that allowed us to, do a little 100 square foot garden or something and expand her garden. And then one year she inherited some money when I think her mom or dad died, and she was like, "Let's do the whole backyard."
Aw.
You know,
Yeah.
and, yeah.
Yeah, because I think that that's something that, because like people who are not in the landscape architect world or anything like that, they think, okay, well, I have to hire a landscaper and he's just going to come plant plants. But like I've been to your studio and seen a lot of the designs that you've done, and you're actually like, depending on the yard and the scope of the project, like you're like, okay, well, we're going to build a fire pit here, and we're going to build like an outdoor eating space here, and then there's going to be a water feature here.
Right.
And so like it's not just plants that you're planting, but it's actually like creating intimate gathering spaces, in ways that are, you know, like just shaping a land in a way that you can't really do with interior design, because you're like, oh no, we need like a rock feature here to kind of block the view of that over there. You're using plants in the vertical space. It's like such a cool, as a designer myself, like I do graphic design and I love to play with interiors. Like I'm a little bit jealous of the way that you get to use vertical space, in a big lawn. And it's just so cool to see like something transform from just this like basically flat thing to a place that you're just like, I want to meditate,
Right. Yeah.
you
And
know?
we did a meditation labyrinth for a Buddhist client of ours in south of DeLand, and and that was 1,100 square feet of flagstones,
Right.
and rocks. It's just kind of one of the rocks are a funny thing in Florida. We don't have a lot of them.
Hmm.
So, but we do end up using rocks and dry creek beds and stuff to help with some drainage solutions and stuff like that. But I always have to be aware that these things are being mined somewhere, being shipped on trains, and
Hmm.
then maybe it's a nice decorative rock in your yard, but it's got an environmental impact. So,
Right.
but it also, if it enhances, the enjoyment of it and gets you out and changes, and it's functional. There's, we need rocks sometimes,
Right.
and we don't have a big selection here, and we export sand.
Right. We export sand from Florida. I'm sure we do. I bet you anything that we do.
Um,
Uh,
yeah, and so also trying to get so above and beyond just sort of plants and maybe a fire pit or something. We're trying to also kind of get more sustainability, wildlife friendly elements into the yard. So one thing that we're really going to push for in 2026 is try to get our our recurring gardening customers to try to get as many of them as possible onto composting.
mhm.
Now they've all sort of been okay with the idea of composting, but um, we're trying to get more of our clients to have the 3 bin system, where you have a bin that you're adding new stuff to. You kind of have one that's kind of in that midway process, and the final bin's the stuff that you're like pulling
Mhm.
from. For yard waste, if they end up putting their kitchen scraps in it, that's another thing that they will need to do more maintenance on, because
Right.
that's
A whole different
we're not there
situation.
enough to.
Mhm. You can call O Town Compost from
Yeah,
Charlie Charlie, not Charlie. Oh gosh, Charlie. Gosh, I forget his last name, but he was just on with O Town Compost, and I actually got my bucket and I started composting. So I'm excited about that. Food waste is hard in the backyard, especially if
yes,
you have
yeah. So
rodents like I do outside.
right, and so no, we may end up needing to haul away some of their yard waste because maybe we're doing some project that's bigger than what the compost can handle. But if
Mhm.
we're diverting, stuff that would normally go to the dumps, doing, they're making some really low grade mulch out of this
Right.
yard waste, but it's not ideal, and it's a lot of driving around
Hmm.
with yard waste in our trucks and wasting time and gas and fuel and our time.
Yeah.
So trying to get that, trying to get more owl boxes, bat houses, stuff like that into our
Yeah, because
projects.
like that's what I was trying to say. I'm so glad you mentioned that because like so much of what like just you think of somebody coming over to put plants in the ground is doing is not looking at things from a whole system
Yeah,
perspective, which is what you do.
yeah. I mean, I
And
would love to even, one of my friends started a solar company. So, hey, while we're here greening up your yard, and maybe the solar panels don't even go on the roof. Maybe they're, some people with enough property, the solar panels could go out in a sunny spot where maybe there's a wildflower meadow around
mhm,
their solar panels or something like that.
yeah, yeah, it's so beautiful. And I feel like you're like doing your part. There's so many problems going on in the world. And of course here on Front Porch Radio, which by the way, you are listening to Front Porch Radio on WPRK 91.5. My name is Julie Weiler. My guest today is David Schroeder with Evolving Landscapes. He's a landscape architect working in Central Florida for many, many years. And it is just a joy to have people that are out there. I talk about the Mr. Rogers, who used to say, "Look for the helpers." I say, "Look for the helpers, the healers, and the heretics." And you're kind of like all three, honestly. And it's
And we
just
should mention we're at Mr. Rogers alumni.
we are at Mr. Rogers. He is an alumni from here, and he's just inspired me so much in so many different ways. And it's just, he had his own imaginary village in the backyard that was new urbanism. There was public transportation, I think.
Yeah. He had the little trolley. I
Did
don't
have
think
the little
anybody
trolley.
was hopping on the highway
Nope,
and
nope.
getting in
Y-
their
Yeah.
car in their
W-
2-car
I don't think we
garage.
ever realized that until just now that he
Yeah.
had some new urbanism going on in his imaginary land.
Now it was a monarchy though.
Well,
In
you know what?
imaginary
We
land,
can't have
so.
everything. I forgot about that part. I mostly remember the puppet with the orange crazy hair.
That one freaked me out.
Okay, enough about Mr. Rogers. But what are oh, gosh, it's already 4:42. Where did the time go? There's some other things that I know that you're really, really interested in. Just, keeping a I love the like new urbanisms. I love city planners. I love landscape architects. I love anybody that's like doing like weird art installations out in the world. All of these like I don't know. I think what is the term technical urbanism?
Yeah, that's nothing that I've participated much
Right,
in,
but you like keep
but I
your
kind of like
your
I'm a support. I do a little guerrilla gardening,
he
which is
would
kind
never
of
admit it on
yeah,
air.
right.
No, you can't say that you do it if you
No,
do
that's
it.
right. Uh, but I will admit to doing a little guerrilla gardening,
Hmm.
which is basically it can be different things, but in my case, it's going around with a Parmesan cheese shaker full of native wildflower seeds and going to forgotten areas and dispensing those.
Yeah, shaking out
And
some wildflower seeds.
yeah, and being careful, not to spread them in anywhere where people are actually actively maintaining it.
Yeah, of
Not
course.
trying to you know.
Take over someone's
Yeah,
yard.
and the
with
chances are they're
wildflowers.
going to see all these seedlings pop up and kill them with herbicide anyway. So just trying to find neglected areas, and
Yeah, but like I
but
know,
now's the best time to do it, folks. Fall is the time to spread wildflower seeds.
but Florida native wildflower seeds,
Florida
I'm
wildflowers,
sure.
yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, oh gosh, now I want to veer. Do we go solar punk or do we go Lou Garden's master conceptual plan that we went
Let's do
to?
Lou Gardens.
Let's do Lou Gardens. Okay. Because I mentioned it a couple. I mean, it was wild. Uh, I live right by Lou Gardens, and so there was a master conceptual. Yeah, it was like the very
review.
first review
Public
thing.
review.
And you and I are both designers, but different kinds of designers. And so, like, it was interesting because, like, there was a very passionate crowd, I will say, well described. And I remember afterwards we were talking about it, and I was like, I want to write a letter to the lady who runs this place. And because there was just so much complaining that had to do with wastewater mostly, which really
And noise.
and noise, of course, and not to like completely invalidate the concerns or whatever. But I was just excited to show up and learn what they were going to do.
Yes.
And as designers, I was like, oh, I don't think these people understand the design process. Like they're literally just giving concepts, asking for feedback. And everyone was taking it as like, oh, this is exactly what
This is written in stone now, and this is happening, and
Yeah. Yeah. And I was most excited about the playground that they were talking about.
That's right.
And so I know that was what we talked about it. That was one of your interests too, natural playgrounds.
Yeah, North Carolina State, where I did my master's work, has a studio lab there called the Natural Learning Initiative, headed by Robin Moore, and he and some other folks spent a lot of time studying children's play and how to make play more nature based.
Mm-hmm.
And I took, sort of an intro class to that 20 something years ago. But then a few years ago, one of my fellow NC State graduates who stuck around after graduating and worked for that studio for like a decade, went deep and heavy into that topic, and then was hired by a franchise of nursery schools called the Nest Schools, who are like over the East Coast, and they moved into Florida, and my friend called me up and said, "You're in Florida, right?" Yeah, I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Want to build some playgrounds?" So I got to build 3 playgrounds in Central Florida. You'll still find some elements that you would expect in most playgrounds. Like
Mm-hmm.
there was still a slide. There
Mm-hmm.
weren't swings. But there were balanced logs, tree cookies, which are like slices of trees that you use as sort of stepping stones.
Oh, okay.
There was, climbing walls at an angle appropriate for toddlers,
Ah,
to get
yeah.
them up like a hill or something. Um, and and they also bring their curriculum outside. So we built these chalkboards, with like natural wood frames and stuff, so art can happen outside,
Oh, cool.
and stuff like that. And so Lou Gardens is that was part of their plan is to have a whole children's zone,
Mm-hmm.
um, which would lean heavily on natural playground elements, at least from the conceptual, you know, thing that they gave us, which is what I was really hoping to hear about.
Right.
And it was a lot about how, having outdoor dining is going to disturb the people on the other side of the lake,
Yeah.
and keep their kids awake or something, which is, I'm sure, all legit concerns.
Right.
But,
Right.
but I think the plans that they have for that garden are good for the community on a whole.
Yeah.
And they should, you know, go through extra lengths to make sure that they're minimizing the effects on the neighborhood.
Yeah.
But she brought up a good point that these things don't exist in the bubble. You gotta they have to exist in capitalist society, so they have to earn a bunch of revenue, and
Right.
so that's
That's the way you do it.
that's
Yeah.
why they're talking about stages and outdoor dining, and why they're doing those light shows and
And
stuff
Christmas,
and Christmas,
holiday
and
things.
yeah, it gets people to the gardens.
Right. I
Um,
mean, I live right across from Lou Gardens, and I go to the plant show, and then I go to Christmas. Because yeah, it is those special events that like kind of do draw you in.
right.
And of course, I mean, you're a bigger plant person than I am, but I'm a plant person as well. And of course, I love having a botanical garden and all that natural space there, and also the opportunities to be learning. And I'm sure I've been to a couple of weddings that have been held there, at least one. Um, yeah, but also, that's the kind of uh, I don't know. I think over time, over years, that may have been a much more quiet neighborhood. But now it's like in the center of everything.
Mm.
And I mean, I can hear what's going on, way further away than Lou Gardens.
Yeah, right.
We're kind
Well,
of in an urban environment.
and one guy did stand up and say, like, "I'm sorry that you're gonna have to hear these concerts." But when I stick my head outside, he's like, I can hear stuff happening at Lake Eola. I can hear stuff
Right.
happening at the Milk Districts. I hear stuff, and
Yeah.
that's why we live in a city.
Right. Throw a party and
Yeah.
have a concert in your backyard.
Right. And yeah, and an unpopular opinion of mine. There was a lot of talk about this is not what Mr. Liu would want,
Mhm.
but Mr. Liu's not here, and we are. And
Yeah.
so this needs to work for the community that's here now, and it's Orlando, pre-Disney. I
Right.
actually don't know the exact date that Blue Garden started.
Well,
It feels like
somebody-
that was all happening
But
pre-Disney.
somebody else there made a really good comment about that, because apparently there was the Lou side of the property, and then at some point the city
No, right.
bought.
Yeah, they
right?
actually expanded the property.
They actually expanded the property. So a lot of what they were talking about, because they're basically talking about rebuilding the like welcome center.
Right. There was like a hands-off zone. That's what.
Yeah, basically, the part that Mr. Liu had was pretty much just getting, regular minor fluffing, but the bigger stuff that they were planning on doing with the welcome center, that was actually on the city side of the property, and so kind of finding a blend. And then also there was this other, because they were really upset about the wastewater, And but they also did not want a parking garage, which would help with permeable surfaces.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
like,
and that's not just the case here. This is really a pet peeve of mine.
Right.
Is that people are afraid of parking decks or just building up.
Right.
But there's nothing worse to me than a parking lot that's 2/3 full at best, probably, and then empty all night long.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, the neighbors were really opposed to a parking deck.
But then they were so upset about the
Right,
wastewater
so-
of a park, because they're basically the Lou Gardens. From what I could gather from the meeting, Lou Gardens was required to add more parking. Like, it's a requirement.
Yeah,
they have to do it.
You're going to have this many people that can walk through your garden.
And so the cognitive dissonance of we absolutely do not want a parking garage, but we're also so upset about the stormwater runoff.
Yeah. If you have a parking deck, you have enough room for a retention pond.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, bless people that have to deal with angry neighbors. And I'm not one of them. I'm a friendly neighbor, and I was very happy to see that. And man, as a young mom, I would have loved to have seen the natural playground that they're proposing. I did think they had like a waterfall. I was like, I think that's a little bit too extreme for the toddlers, but but that's why they were having the meeting. Like, let's talk, let's chat.
And there's probably different zones for different ages,
right?
Typically on playgrounds at large.
Yeah, I'm sure that there is. But yeah, it was fun to be a part of the conversation. And just I was just like, oh, let's eat some popcorn and hear what's going on, the drama in the neighborhood.
You were much more interested in the social aspect of the community.
I'm a social psychologist.
I was just like feeling for the landscape architects and designers,
right?
That were having all their ideas like not even addressed.
It was a kind of like for the designer people, but
well, they now know the community's, at least the vocal community's concerns.
Right, absolutely, and they can take that into consideration. So that's great. That's why we have these conversations, everyone. Okay, so we only have a few minutes left, so I would love to hear from you, like, let's talk about like maybe a native plant that you love or something simple that people can do right now. I mean, we talked about some wildflower sprinkles perhaps, but like just what are some easy ways people can start transforming their lawns into a more Florida friendly yard?
Well, the easiest way is just the replacement method. So let's say you had a crepe myrtle that's lived its past life, or you're like, man, I would really like a small tree in my front yard, and just the go-to is crepe myrtles, right? Mm-hmm. You could look at a Florida native called the Simpson stopper. It's you may not be able to find it in the nurseries quite as big as you'd find a crepe myrtle, but they'll grow to about the same size. They'll have these beautiful white flowers in spring, followed by red berries. Birds love them. And what I do, if Heather Buchanan, my horticulturalist, is listening to me now,
Hi, Heather.
I love trimming them up or limbing them up. Because you may buy them in more shrub form with leaves all the way down to the ground, and they would make a nice privacy screening plant if you wish. But I usually they're multi-trunked, and I usually limb them up to give them more of a crepe myrtle look. So that's sort of the replacement, just no, and that doesn't even change the design of your typical standard. Suburban home. You're not going to stick out. No one's going to like look at you and be like,
what's that weird hippie neighbor doing over there?
Get with the neighborhood or whatever. There's also, if you could maybe just set a small part of your backyard, perhaps, where you decide that, you're not going to plant anything there, and you just, one option would be literally like, there is a movement where people are like, just let their yards go.
Right.
But your yard is most likely embedded with invasive seeds and probably already have invasive plants everywhere. So as much as I have to hold my nose to do it, when we are converting yards, we have to get out big machines and sometimes nasty chemicals for some of these invasive plants that just won't die.
Mm-hmm.
And it's our fault that they're there. But then it's sort of, I kind of think of that as like the ER,
Mm-hmm.
My God, this yard stat,
Right.
get this thing, native plants and whatever, but, and then after and I learned that kind of approach working in Reno when my boss sent me to an ecology conference where there was nothing but ecologists, restoration ecologists.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to do some nasty stuff because humans have caused some nasty issues, and
Mm-hmm.
you can't pay 10,000 people to go hand weed 40,000 acres.
Right.
You got to nuke it pretty much and start over.
Mm-hmm.
So got sidetracked.
That's okay.
So maybe clear out an area in your backyard, throw down some wildflower seeds, or just, let it go back. Hands off.
Right.
That's one of the main things. It's just we put our hands on things too often.
Mm-hmm.
You could even just leave the leaves there. I mean, that's sort of like November, right? Leave
Right.
the leaves.
Yeah. Let
That's
them
where
enrich.
that's where all the beneficial insects overwinter and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. And then, if you want to go more drastic, you start tearing out your yard and filling it with.
Yeah, I've seen you do it. You're just like, you know what, this little patch right here, I'm just gonna rip up like 5 square feet, and I'm
Yep.
gonna plant some plants right here.
And you can do it slowly, and you can mix in some of your favorites. So,
A weekend
that's
at a
one of our
time.
favorite things is, maybe there's an accent plant that's not native, but then you surround it with native ground covers and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And you still have because, people have connections with plants. We try to make that clear. Like if you have some connection, as long as it doesn't fall into our invasive categories,
Right.
then,
Yeah. Like I have a soft spot for roses.
yeah.
And I have a daughter that's middle name is Rose, and I'm gonna have a rose
So you
garden.
got to have a rose garden.
I'm gonna have a rose garden. So, man, it's been so great talking to you. Of course, one of the other things you can do is hire a professional.
Of course.
We're
happy to help anyone.
Absolutely. Evolving Landscapes, I know you do. You've done a lot of work in like the Thornton Park neighborhood, but you go all the way up to DeLand. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much we cover Orange, Seminole, and Volusia counties on a regular basis. Like our gardeners could reach there. One of the playgrounds we did was in Tampa, and another one was in Lakeland.
Yeah.
So we will travel for larger projects.
Yeah, and you'll do commercial as well, right?
Yeah, small commercial, and they just need to be on board with us. I'm not looking to,
Yeah, the right.
I'm not
kind.
looking to convince
the right kind of commercial.
Yeah.
But, yeah, the hip ones, if you will. All right, man, it has been great having you on the show. Thank you so much for being on Front Porch Radio. EvolvingLandscapesLLC.com. Am I doing that right?
Evolving
Just Google
landscapes.com.
Yeah, just Google it. So that's going to be great. Also, I have Front Porch Radio. If you missed any part of the show and you want to listen to the whole thing, it's going to be on Substack later. So you can just go on there and look for Front Porch Radio and give me about a few days and I'll get this podcast up. And I usually put a little perk for my guests will be tucked into the podcast description. So that's always a fun thing too. And so, yeah, I will just say that whether we're talking about native plants, depaving a little corner of our world, or imagining solar punk cities full of shade and shared gardens, we can build places that are friendlier, wilder, more human, and more attuned to where we actually live. So this week, take a moment to notice the scrappy little plant cracking through your driveway or the pollinator hovering in the corner of your yard. Maybe let yourself imagine a neighborhood where kids are climbing the trees like they used to. And where the places between our homes feel alive again. So thank you so much for pulling up a chair on the porch with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, and reminding us that the future isn't something that we're waiting for. It's something that we're literally planting. Like you're literally planting the future. And that's just so cool to me. So until next time, take care of your little piece of the world and let it take care of you too. Signing off and turning on the other music. I'm good. I'm going to do it. I'm doing good. I can multitask. Where'd I go? Okay, here we go.